When gunshots echoed through Lincoln Elementary, single dad Marcus Thompson had one split second to choose: run to safety or shield innocent children with his own body. His decision would save 8 young lives, earn a presidential phone call, and prove that ordinary fathers can become extraordinary heroes when love conquers fear. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across Lincoln Elementary School as Marcus Thompson pulled into the parking lot. His weathered pickup truck made a familiar grinding sound as he turned off the engine. In the passenger seat, his 8-year-old daughter Emma bounced excitedly, her backpack already strapped on. "Daddy, you're coming to see my presentation today, right?" Emma asked, her big brown eyes filled with hope. Marcus smiled, his heart swelling with love for his little girl. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, princess. You've worked so hard on that volcano project." It had been 3 years since Sarah's death. 3 years of single parenthood, of learning to braid hair through YouTube videos, of burning countless dinners while trying to be both mother and father. Marcus worked double shifts at the construction site to keep food on the table, but he never missed the important moments in Emma's life. As they walked toward the school entrance, Marcus noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Something about it felt wrong. The windows were tinted too dark, and the engine was still running. His construction worker instincts, honed by years of watching for danger on job sites, kicked in. "Emma, stay close to Daddy," he said quietly, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. The morning started normally enough. Marcus kissed Emma goodbye at her classroom door and headed to the main office to sign in as a volunteer. Mrs. Patterson, the school secretary, greeted him warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Emma's so excited about her presentation today." "She's been practicing for weeks," Marcus replied, pride evident in his voice. "I brought my camera to record it." At 10:30 a.m., parents and families began gathering in the gymnasium for the 3rd grade science fair. Marcus found a seat near the front, his phone ready to capture every moment of Emma's big day. She spotted him in the crowd and waved enthusiastically. That's when everything changed. The first gunshot echoed through the hallway like thunder. Parents froze, unsure of what they'd heard. Then came the screaming from the main corridor. Marcus's blood turned to ice. His military training from his brief stint in the National Guard years ago kicked in immediately. This wasn't a car backfiring or construction noise. This was real danger. "Everyone get down," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "Stay calm and get the children behind the stage." Chaos erupted as the gymnasium doors burst open. A man in a dark jacket appeared, weapon raised. Parents screamed and dove for cover, pulling their children with them. Teachers tried to shield students with their own bodies. Marcus didn't think. He just moved. Without hesitation, he threw himself between the gunman and a group of terrified children huddled near the wall. Among them was Ms. Rodriguez, Emma's teacher, who was trying to protect 3 students who couldn't reach the stage in time. The first bullet hit Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around. The pain was immediate and excruciating, but he stayed on his feet. He spread his arms wide, making himself as large a target as possible. "Please," he called out to the gunman, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "These are just kids. You want to hurt someone? I'm right here." The second bullet caught him in the chest. Marcus staggered but didn't fall. Behind him, he could hear Ms. Rodriguez whispering reassurances to the children, telling them everything would be okay. "Daddy?" Emma's voice cut through the chaos. She was across the room, safely behind the stage with other students, but she could see what was happening. Marcus turned toward her voice for just a moment, and his heart broke seeing the terror in his daughter's eyes. But he also saw something else: determination. Even at 8 years old, Emma was trying to comfort the younger children around her, just like he had taught her. "I love you, princess," he called out, his voice growing weaker. "Be brave for Daddy." The third bullet found its mark in his abdomen. This time, Marcus dropped to one knee, but he kept his body positioned between the children and danger. Blood seeped through his flannel shirt, but his resolve never wavered. The gunman paused, perhaps surprised by Marcus's unwavering courage. In that moment of hesitation, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police were finally arriving. "It's over," Marcus said quietly to the man. "You can still walk away from this. These children don't deserve to be hurt. But desperation makes people do terrible things." The gunman raised his weapon one final time, aiming directly at Marcus's head. In those final seconds, Marcus thought about Sarah. He thought about the promise he'd made at her deathbed to always protect Emma, to be the father she deserved. He thought about all the birthdays he might miss, all the graduations he wouldn't attend, all the moments he'd never share with his daughter. But he also thought about the children behind him, innocent lives that deserved a chance to grow up, to have their own families, to make their mark on the world. If his death could save them, it would be worth it. The final shot rang out just as SWAT officers burst through the gymnasium doors. Marcus collapsed, his body finally giving in to the trauma. But even as he fell, he made sure to fall forward, away from the children he'd been protecting. Ms. Rodriguez rushed to his side, pressing her hands against his wounds to try to stop the bleeding. Tears streamed down her face as she looked into his eyes. "The children," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "Are they?" "They're safe," she assured him. "You saved them all. You're a hero, Marcus." Emma broke free from the teachers holding her back and ran to her father's side. She knelt beside him, taking his hand in her small ones. "Daddy, please don't leave me," she sobbed. "I need you." Marcus squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "I'll never leave you, princess. I'll always be watching over you. Remember what I taught you: be kind, be brave, and always help others when you can." The paramedics arrived and began working frantically to stabilize him. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, Marcus looked back at the children he'd protected. They were all alive, all safe, thanks to his sacrifice. In the ambulance, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness. The paramedics worked tirelessly, but they knew the wounds were severe. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, the same name as his late wife, held his hand during the ride. "Stay with us," she urged. "Your daughter needs you." "She'll be okay," Marcus whispered. "She's stronger than she knows." At the hospital, doctors fought for 6 grueling hours to save Marcus's life. Emma waited in the hallway with her grandmother, who had driven 3 hours after receiving the terrible call. News crews gathered outside, word of the hero's sacrifice spreading quickly. During surgery, Marcus flatlined twice. Each time, the medical team managed to bring him back, but his condition remained critical. The bullets had caused massive internal damage, and the blood loss had been severe. While Marcus fought for his life, the story of his heroism spread across the nation. Video footage from security cameras showed his incredible bravery, how he'd positioned himself between danger and innocent children without a moment's hesitation. Ms. Rodriguez, still shaken but determined to honor Marcus's sacrifice, spoke to reporters outside the hospital. "Marcus Thompson didn't just save those children's lives today," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "He saved their futures, their dreams, everything they'll ever become. He's the definition of a hero." The school principal, Dr. Williams, added, "In 30 years of education, I've never seen such selfless courage." Marcus knew the risks, but he chose to protect others anyway. That's the kind of man, the kind of father, we all hope to be. On the 3rd day, as Marcus remained in intensive care, something unexpected happened. The White House called. President Johnson had seen the news coverage and was deeply moved by Marcus's story. He wanted to speak with the hero personally, to thank him for his service to humanity. Emma was allowed into the ICU room when the call came through. Marcus was awake but weak, machines beeping steadily around him. A nurse held the phone to his ear as the familiar voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Thompson, this is President Johnson. I wanted to personally thank you for your extraordinary courage. What you did was beyond heroic. You embodied the very best of what it means to be an American, a father, and a human being." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mr. President. I just did what any parent would do." "No, sir," the president replied firmly. "What you did was exceptional. You risked everything to save children who weren't even your own. That takes a special kind of love, a special kind of character. The nation honors you today, and history will remember your sacrifice." The president paused before continuing. "I understand you're a single father, Mr. Thompson. I want you to know that if there's anything at all, that you or your daughter need, you have the full support of this office." Emma leaned close to the phone. "Mr. President? This is Emma, Marcus's daughter." "Hello, Emma. Your father is the bravest man I've ever heard of. You should be very proud of him." "I am," Emma said, wiping away tears. "He's the best daddy in the whole world." After the call ended, Marcus looked at his daughter with eyes full of love and regret. "Emma, I'm sorry I scared you. I never want to leave you, but I had to protect those other children." Emma climbed carefully onto the bed beside him, mindful of all the tubes and wires. "I understand, Daddy. You taught me that we help people when they're in trouble. You were helping." "That's my smart girl," Marcus whispered, stroking her hair. "I'm so proud of you for being brave." Recovery was long and difficult. Marcus endured multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy. The community rallied around the Thompson family in ways that restored faith in humanity. Local businesses donated meals, groceries, and household necessities. A construction company started a fund to cover medical expenses and lost wages. Children from Emma's class made get-well cards, and the entire school organized fundraisers. But perhaps most meaningful were the visits from the families of the children Marcus had saved. Each parent came to thank him personally, often bringing their children along. Mrs. Garcia, mother of 6-year-old Sophia, broke down in tears during her visit. "My daughter is alive because of you," she said. "She talks about you every day, calls you her guardian angel." Mr. Chin, whose son David was one of the protected children, brought a handmade photo album. "These are pictures of David playing soccer, doing homework, laughing with his friends. Every single one of these moments exists because of your courage." The stories went on and on. 8 children had been directly shielded by Marcus's body that day. 8 families remained whole because one man chose to sacrifice everything for strangers. As Marcus slowly healed, he began to understand the true impact of his actions. It wasn't just about that single moment of heroism, it was about the ripple effects of love and courage that would echo through generations. Emma, now 9, had been profoundly affected by witnessing her father's sacrifice. She started a kindness club at school, organizing drives for homeless shelters and visits to nursing homes. When asked why, she would simply say, "My daddy taught me to help others." 6 months after the shooting, Marcus was finally able to return to work, though in a limited capacity. The construction company had held his position and even promoted him to a supervisory role that was less physically demanding. On his first day back, his co-workers greeted him with applause and a banner that read, "Welcome back, hero." Marcus was embarrassed by the attention, but his supervisor, Joe Martinez, pulled him aside. "Marcus, you need to understand something," Joe said. "What you did changed all of us. My kids go to Lincoln Elementary. My youngest, Miguel, was at that science fair. He's alive today because you were willing to die for him." "I just did what felt right," Marcus replied. "Exactly. And that's what makes you special. Most people freeze in moments like that. You moved toward danger to save others. That's not normal, man. That's heroic." The first anniversary of the shooting was declared Marcus Thompson Day by the City Council. A ceremony was held at the school, now equipped with enhanced security measures and a memorial garden dedicated to second chances and new beginnings. Emma, now more mature beyond her years, spoke at the ceremony. Standing at the podium in her best dress, she looked out at the crowd of hundreds who had gathered to honor her father. "My daddy always tells me that being brave isn't about not being scared," she began, her voice clear and strong. "It's about doing the right thing even when you are scared. That day my daddy was scared too. But he chose to protect other people's children because he knew it was right." She paused, looking at Marcus in the front row, still using a cane but smiling proudly. "I want to grow up to be like my daddy. Not because he's famous or because the president called him a hero, but because he has a good heart. He taught me that we're all connected, that other people's children matter just as much as your own." The crowd rose in thunderous applause. Several people in the audience were crying, including tough construction workers who had never expected to be moved to tears by a 9-year-old's speech. Ms. Rodriguez, who had returned to teaching after taking a brief leave to recover from her own trauma, spoke next. "Marcus Thompson didn't just save lives that day. He saved our faith in humanity. He showed us what love looks like in action." As the ceremony concluded, families began approaching Marcus to share their stories. The 8 children he had directly protected were all thriving. They had formed a special bond, calling themselves Mr. Marcus's kids, and they visited him regularly. Sofia Garcia, now 7, ran up and hugged his legs. "Mr. Marcus, I learned to read chapter books. Want to hear me read?" David Chin, 8 years old, showed off his latest soccer trophy. "I scored the winning goal and thought about you, Mr. Marcus. You make me want to be brave too." Each child represented a future that might not have existed without Marcus's sacrifice. They would grow up, go to college, have careers, start families of their own. Their children and grandchildren would exist because one man chose love over self-preservation. 2 years later, Marcus received another unexpected call. This time it was from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell his story. Initially reluctant, Marcus agreed when he learned that all proceeds would go to school safety programs and support for single parents. The documentary, titled The Heart of a Hero, premiered at film festivals across the country. It didn't just focus on the shooting itself but on the man behind the heroic act, his struggles as a single father, his love for Emma, his quiet acts of kindness throughout his life. Interviews with neighbors revealed a pattern of selflessness. Marcus had helped elderly Mrs. Patterson with her groceries every week since her husband died. He had volunteered to build a wheelchair ramp for the Johnson family when their son was injured. He had donated his Christmas bonus to help a co-worker whose house burned down. Marcus Thompson was a hero long before that day at the school, said his neighbor Tom Bradley. He just never had cameras around to see it. The film's most powerful moment came when Emma, now 11, was interviewed about her father's influence on her life. "People ask me if I'm angry that my daddy almost died," she said, looking directly into the camera. "But I'm not angry. I'm proud. My daddy showed me that love is stronger than fear, that protecting others is more important than protecting yourself. I want to live my life that way too." At the film's premiere, Marcus was invited to speak to the audience of celebrities, politicians, and community leaders. He was nervous. Public speaking had never been his strength, but Emma squeezed his hand encouragingly. "3 years ago, I made a split-second decision that changed everything," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I didn't think about being a hero. I didn't think about fame or recognition. I just saw children in danger and I moved to protect them." He paused, looking out at the audience. "But the real heroes are the teachers who shield their students every day. The single parents who work multiple jobs to provide for their children. The first responders who run toward danger while others run away. Heroes are all around us, doing extraordinary things that no one ever hears about." The standing ovation lasted for several minutes. Later, at the after-party, Marcus was approached by a young woman who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Williams. "Mr. Thompson, I was one of the paramedics who treated you that day. My name is Sarah, same as your late wife. I wanted to thank you for something." "Thank me?" Marcus was confused. "You're the one who helped save my life." "You changed my life," Sarah explained. "Seeing your courage, your willingness to sacrifice everything for others, inspired me to go back to school. I'm now an emergency room doctor, specializing in trauma cases. I've saved lives because you showed me what real heroism looks like." This was the ripple effect Marcus had never anticipated. His single act of courage had inspired countless others to be better, to do more, to live with greater purpose. As the years passed, Marcus and Emma's bond only grew stronger. The trauma they had shared, the months of recovery, the public attention, it had all served to deepen their relationship. Emma grew into a remarkable young woman, driven by compassion and guided by the values her father had demonstrated. On her 16th birthday, Emma surprised Marcus with a special gift. She had been accepted into a summer program for young volunteers at children's hospitals. Her application essay had been about her father's influence on her life. "Daddy, you taught me that the most important thing in life is how we treat others," she said as they sat together on their front porch. "I want to spend my life helping people just like you did." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Emma, I am so proud of the woman you're becoming. Your mother would be too." "I think about her sometimes," Emma said softly. "I think she would be proud of both of us. We survived something terrible, but we didn't let it make us bitter or afraid. We chose love instead." That evening, as Marcus tucked his 16-year-old daughter into bed, a ritual they had maintained despite her protest that she was too old, he reflected on the journey they had traveled together. The shooting had lasted only minutes, but its impact would echo for generations. 8 children were alive and thriving. Dozens of others had been inspired to lives of service. A community had come together in ways that strengthened the bonds between neighbors and strangers. Most importantly, Emma had learned the most valuable lesson life could offer: that love, courage, and compassion were choices that could be made even in the darkest moments. As Marcus turned off the lights and headed to his own room, he whispered a prayer of gratitude. He had been given a second chance, an opportunity to continue being the father Emma deserved and to witness the incredible woman she was becoming. The scars on his body would always remind him of that terrible day, but they also reminded him of something beautiful. That ordinary people were capable of extraordinary love, and that sometimes, the most heroic thing you could do was simply put someone else's life before your own. Years later, when Emma graduated from medical school and dedicated her degree to her father, Marcus realized that his sacrifice had created something far more precious than he could have ever imagined. He had not only saved lives that day, he had helped create a future filled with hope, compassion, and endless possibility. The single father who had blocked bullets with his body had done more than save children from a gunman. He had shown the world what true heroism looked like, and in doing so, had planted seeds of courage and kindness that would continue to grow for generations to come. As President Johnson had said on that hospital phone call years earlier, history would indeed remember Marcus Thompson's sacrifice. But more than that, his legacy would live on in every act of kindness his story inspired, in every moment someone chose courage over fear, and in every person who decided that protecting others was worth any risk. In the end, that was the true measure of a hero, not the moment of sacrifice itself, but the ripples of love and courage that spread outward from that moment, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen, creating a better world one brave choice at a time. And in that small house on Maple Street, as a single father tucked his daughter into bed each night, the greatest heroic act of all continued, the daily choice to love unconditionally, to guide with wisdom, and to raise a child who would carry that same spirit of sacrifice and service into the world. 10 years after that fateful day, Emma Thompson stood at the podium of the National Heroes Foundation Awards ceremony. Now 21 and a medical student, she had been invited to present the Marcus Thompson Courage Award, an annual honor given to ordinary people who performed extraordinary acts of selflessness. My father always said that heroes aren't born, they're made by the choices they make in critical moments, Emma began, her voice carrying the same strength that had sustained her family through their darkest hours. Today we honor someone who embodies that principle. In the audience, Marcus sat in the front row, his hair now silver but his eyes still bright with pride. Beside him sat Sarah Martinez, the paramedic who had treated him that day and who had become like family over the years. Their friendship had grown into something deeper, a love built on shared trauma, mutual respect, and Emma's enthusiastic approval. The award recipient was Maria Santos, a young mother who had pulled 3 children from a burning building despite having no training in rescue operations. As Maria accepted her award, she looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, your story gave me the courage to act," she said through tears. "When I saw those children trapped, I remembered what you did. I thought, if a father could risk everything for children who weren't even his own, then I had to try to save them too." This had become the pattern over the years. Marcus's story had inspired a movement of everyday heroism. Teachers talked about pulling a Marcus Thompson when they went above and beyond for their students. Parents referenced his sacrifice when teaching their children about courage. First responders carried his photo in their gear as a reminder of what true service looked like. The Marcus Thompson Elementary School, formerly Lincoln Elementary, had become a model for other institutions. The memorial garden where the shooting occurred was now a place of healing and reflection, visited by thousands each year. Students learned about conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, and community service as core parts of their curriculum. Emma often volunteered there, reading to younger children and helping with science projects. Watching her interact with the kids, Marcus was amazed by her natural ability to connect with them. She had her mother's gentle spirit combined with a strength forged through adversity. "Daddy, look," 8-year-old Tommy Rodriguez called out as Emma helped him with his volcano project. The same type of presentation she had been giving on that terrible day years ago. Tommy was Ms. Rodriguez's nephew, and he had heard the story of Marcus's heroism countless times. "Mr. Marcus, Emma says you're the bravest person she knows," Tommy continued. "Is it true you stopped bad guys with just your body?" Marcus knelt down to Tommy's level, something that was easier now thanks to the physical therapy he still maintained religiously. "Tommy, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. That day I was very scared, but I knew I had to protect you and all the other children. Would you do it again?" Tommy asked with the innocent curiosity only children possess. Marcus looked over at Emma, who was listening intently despite having heard this conversation countless times. "Every single time," he said without hesitation. "Because every child deserves to be safe, to grow up, to have dreams and make them come true." Later that evening, as the 3-generation Thompson family sat around their dinner table, Marcus, Emma, and now Sarah, who had moved in 6 months earlier, they reflected on the day's events. "Dad, I've been thinking about something," Emma said, pushing her pasta around her plate thoughtfully. "I want to establish a scholarship fund. The Marcus Thompson Scholarship for children who've lost parents to violence." Marcus nearly choked on his water. "Emma, that's an incredible idea. But you don't need to use my name." "Yes, I do," Emma said firmly. "Your sacrifice saved lives, but it also created a legacy. Kids who've experienced trauma like I did need to know that heroes exist, that good people will fight for them. Your story gives them hope." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hand. "She's right, you know. I see it every day in the emergency room. When children come in after traumatic experiences, their parents often mention your story. It helps them believe that people will protect them." The scholarship fund launched 6 months later with an initial donation from the documentary proceeds and contributions from the 8 families whose children Marcus had saved. The fund's first recipient was a 15-year-old girl named Isabella whose father had been killed while protecting his family during a home invasion. At the scholarship presentation ceremony, Isabella spoke about how Marcus's story had given her strength during her darkest moments. "When I learned about Mr. Thompson, I realized that my father died a hero too," she said. "And that heroes leave behind more than just memories, they leave behind inspiration for others to be brave." Marcus was deeply moved by Isabella's words, but what touched him most was seeing Emma's reaction. His daughter had tears streaming down her face, not from sadness but from joy at seeing how their family's pain had been transformed into purpose. The ripple effects continued to spread in ways Marcus had never anticipated. Dr. Sarah Williams, the former paramedic, had established a training program for first responders focusing on trauma care and crisis psychology. The program was named the Thompson Protocol, emphasizing the importance of treating both physical and emotional wounds. Construction workers across the country had created the Marcus Thompson Safety Initiative, implementing new protocols to protect each other on job sites. They wore hard hats with MT Hero stickers, reminding them that looking out for colleagues wasn't just about following rules, it was about embodying the spirit of sacrifice that Marcus had shown. Even Hollywood had taken notice. A major film studio was developing a movie based on Marcus's story, with the condition that all profits would go to school safety programs and support for single parents. Emma had insisted on having creative control to ensure the story remained authentic to their experience. "I don't want them to make you into some kind of superhuman character," Emma had told the producers. "My dad is a hero because he's human, because he felt fear and chose courage anyway. That's what makes his story so powerful." The film's director, James Chin, David Chen's uncle, one of the children Marcus had saved, was passionate about telling the story correctly. "This isn't just about one man's heroism," he explained to the studio executives. "It's about how ordinary people can make extraordinary choices, and how those choices create waves of goodness that last for generations." As Marcus approached his 50th birthday, he reflected on the unexpected turns his life had taken. What had started as the worst day of his life had somehow become the foundation for more meaning and purpose than he had ever imagined possible. Emma was now in her final year of medical school, specializing in pediatric trauma surgery. She had chosen this field specifically because of her experience, wanting to help children who faced the kind of life-threatening situations she had witnessed. "I want to be the doctor who saves the next child like me," she had told Marcus when declaring her specialty. "I want to be the person who gives families hope when everything seems hopeless." Sarah had become not just Marcus's partner but Emma's second mother in every way that mattered. The three of them had formed a family unit built on love, mutual support and shared commitment to service. Sarah's own two children from a previous marriage, 12-year-old Miguel and 14-year-old Sophia, had embraced Marcus and Emma completely. The blended family often volunteered together at community events, homeless shelters and disaster relief efforts. They had become known throughout their city as the family that showed up whenever help was needed. On Marcus's 50th birthday, the surprise party Emma organized brought together hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by his story. The 8 children he had saved, now teenagers, presented him with a photo album documenting their achievements and milestones. "Mr. Marcus," said David Chin, now 17 and the student body president at his high school, "we made a pact when we were younger. We promised each other that we would live lives worthy of your sacrifice. I think we're doing okay so far." The photos showed graduation ceremonies, sports victories, academic achievements, volunteer work and family celebrations. Each image represented a moment that might never have existed without Marcus's courage. Sofia Garcia, now 16 and planning to become a teacher, had written him a letter that she read aloud at the party. "Dear Mr. Marcus, when I was little, I used to have nightmares about that day. But as I got older, I realized that the most important part wasn't the scary man with the gun, it was you, standing between us and danger. You taught me that when bad things happen, good people step up to help. That's why I want to be a teacher, so I can protect and inspire children just like you protected us." But perhaps the most meaningful gift came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman Marcus had been helping with groceries for years, had saved every newspaper clipping, magazine article, and photo from his story. She had compiled them into a scrapbook with a simple title, "Our Neighborhood Hero." "Marcus," she said as she presented the book, "you need to understand something. You didn't just save those children that day. You saved this whole community's faith and goodness. You reminded us that heroes aren't mythical figures. They're our neighbors, our friends, the people we see every day." As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Marcus found himself standing in his backyard with Emma and Sarah, looking up at the stars. The same stars Sarah, his late wife, used to say were watching over them. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked quietly. "What you did that day?" Marcus considered the question seriously, as he always did when Emma asked him something important. "No, sweetheart. I regret that it had to happen at all. I regret that children had to be scared, that families had to suffer. But I don't regret my choice. I would make the same decision 1,000 times over. Even knowing how much pain you'd go through? The surgeries, the physical therapy, all of it?" Sarah added. "Especially knowing that," Marcus replied. "Because I also know what came after. I know that those 8 children are alive and thriving. I know that our story inspired other people to be brave. I know that you found your calling because of what happened that day, Sarah. And I know that Emma has grown into a woman who will spend her life healing others." He paused, wrapping his arms around both of them. "When I was lying on that gymnasium floor, bleeding and wondering if I would survive, I prayed that my life would have meaning. I prayed that Emma would be okay, that she would grow up to be strong and kind and brave. Looking at both of you now, I know those prayers were answered in ways I never could have imagined." Emma leaned into her father's embrace, feeling the same safety and love that had sustained her through the darkest periods of her childhood. "Daddy, I need you to know something. The day you saved those children, you saved me too. You showed me what real love looks like, love that's willing to sacrifice everything for others. That's the kind of doctor I want to be, the kind of person I want to be." 2 years later, Dr. Emma Thompson graduated at the top of her medical school class. Her graduation speech, titled "The Healing Power of Heroism," brought the entire auditorium to tears as she spoke about how her father's courage had shaped her calling to medicine. "Medical professionals are taught to first do no harm," she said, looking out at her classmates and their families. "But I believe we're called to do more than that. We're called to be healers not just of bodies but of spirits. We're called to be heroes in white coats, standing between our patients and despair, just as my father stood between those children and danger." Marcus sat in the front row, Sarah beside him, tears of pride streaming down his face. His little girl, who had once needed protection from the world's cruelty, was now ready to heal that same world. After the ceremony, Dr. James Rodriguez, the head of pediatric surgery at the Children's Hospital where Emma would begin her residency, approached Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that your daughter is going to be an exceptional surgeon. But more than that, she's going to be the kind of doctor who gives families hope in their darkest hours. That's a rare gift, and I believe it comes directly from watching your example." As they walked across the campus after the ceremony, Emma stopped at a memorial garden dedicated to healthcare workers who had died in service. She placed her hand on one of the memorial stones and made a quiet promise. "I will honor your sacrifice every day," she whispered, though Marcus knew she was speaking not just to the memorial but to him. "I will be brave when patients need me to be brave. I will stand between children and danger, just in a different way." Marcus watched his daughter, now Dr. Thompson, and felt a profound sense of completion. The scared 8-year-old who had watched her father get shot had grown into a woman who would dedicate her life to saving others. The ripple effects of that terrible day had created something beautiful and lasting. That evening, as the family celebrated Emma's achievement at their favorite restaurant, Marcus received yet another unexpected call. This time, it was from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. "Mr. Thompson, we're organizing a global conference on civilian protection and heroic intervention. We would be honored if you would serve as our keynote speaker. Your story has inspired peacekeepers and humanitarian workers around the world." Marcus looked around the table at his family, Emma, Sarah, Miguel, and Sophia, all of whom were encouraging him to accept. "I'm not much of a public speaker," he said into the phone. "Sir, with respect, you've been speaking to the world for over a decade now. Every time someone chooses courage over fear, every time someone protects a stranger, every time someone stands up for what's right, they're speaking the same language you spoke that day. We just want to give you a platform to say it out loud." 6 months later, Marcus found himself addressing an audience of international dignitaries, humanitarian workers, and peacekeepers at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Emma and Sarah sat in the gallery, watching with pride as this quiet construction worker from a small American town addressed some of the world's most influential people. "I never intended to be a hero," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the assembly hall. "I was just a single father trying to raise his daughter right, trying to teach her that we have a responsibility to protect and care for each other." He paused, looking up at Emma in the gallery. "When I saw those children in danger, I didn't think about nationality or race or religion. I didn't think about politics or policy. I just saw children who needed protection and I moved to protect them. That's not heroism, that's humanity. The speech, later dubbed the Humanity Address, was translated into dozens of languages and shared across social media platforms worldwide. The central message, that protecting others is the most fundamental expression of our shared humanity, resonated with people from every culture and background. But for Marcus, the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. A week after the UN speech, he received a letter from Afghanistan, written by a young soldier named Captain Jennifer Walsh. Mr. Thompson, the letter read, I carry a photo of you in my combat gear. Not because you're famous, but because you remind me why I'm here. Every day in this war zone, I see civilians, children, families, elderly people, who are caught in the crossfire of conflicts they didn't create. When I feel scared or overwhelmed, I think about what you did. I think about how you chose to protect others even when it meant risking everything. Your courage gives me the strength to keep protecting people, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous. The letter went on to describe how Captain Walsh had shared Marcus's story with her entire unit, and how it had become a source of inspiration for soldiers who were struggling with the moral complexities of their mission. We call it the Thompson Standard, she wrote. When we're faced with difficult decisions, we ask ourselves, what would Marcus Thompson do? The answer is always the same: protect the innocent no matter the cost. Marcus was deeply moved by the letter, but what touched him most was the realization that his moment of sacrifice had somehow transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. The simple act of standing between danger and innocence had become a universal symbol of human decency. Emma, now 6 months into her residency and already recognized as one of the most promising young surgeons in the hospital, had framed Captain Walsh's letter and hung it in their family room next to the Presidential Commendation and dozens of other honors her father had received. Dad, she said one evening as they were having dinner, do you realize that your story is literally being taught in schools around the world? I met a visiting medical student from Japan yesterday, and she knew all about what you did. She said children in her country learn about the Thompson courage in their ethics classes. Marcus shook his head in amazement. It doesn't feel real sometimes. I still feel like just a regular guy who did what anyone would do. But that's exactly why it's so powerful, Sarah interjected. You're not a superhero or a trained professional. You're an ordinary person who made an extraordinary choice. That makes your story accessible to everyone. Every parent can imagine being in your situation, and they can imagine making the same choice. As Marcus approached his 55th birthday, he began to think about legacy in new ways. Emma was thriving in her medical career, already performing complex surgeries and earning recognition from senior doctors. Sarah had been promoted to head of emergency medical training at the regional hospital. Their blended family was strong and loving. The Marcus Thompson Foundation, established with proceeds from the documentary and book deals, had distributed over $2 million in scholarships and grants to families affected by violence. The foundation's work had expanded internationally, supporting peace education programs in conflict zones around the world. But Marcus knew that his most important legacy wasn't institutional or financial. It was personal. Every day he received letters, emails, and messages from people who had been inspired by his story to act with courage in their own lives. A teacher in Detroit wrote about standing up to school bullies who were targeting immigrant students. A businessman in Seattle described how he had risked his career to expose corruption in his company. A teenage girl in rural Montana told about defending a classmate with special needs from cruel teasing. Each story followed the same pattern: someone faced with a choice between safety and doing what's right, remembering Marcus's example and choosing courage. The ripple effects had spread so far and wide that Marcus had lost count of the lives that had been touched. On a quiet Sunday morning, as Marcus and Emma attended church service at the small community chapel where Sarah's funeral had been held so many years earlier, the pastor spoke about the parable of the Good Samaritan. Sometimes, Pastor Williams said, we think heroism requires special training or extraordinary circumstances. But the truth is, opportunities to be good Samaritans present themselves to us every day. We can choose to cross to the other side of the road, or we can stop to help. After the service, a young boy approached Marcus shyly. Mr. Thompson? I'm writing a school report about heroes. Can I ask you a question? Of course, Marcus replied, kneeling down to the boy's level as he always did when speaking with children. What's the most important thing about being a hero? Marcus thought carefully before answering. The most important thing is understanding that you don't have to be perfect or special or trained to help others. You just have to care enough to try. Heroes are ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things when it matters most. The boy nodded solemnly, then surprised Marcus by giving him a quick hug before running back to his parents. Emma, who had witnessed the exchange, linked her arm through her father's as they walked to their car. "You know, Dad, I think that little boy is going to remember this conversation for the rest of his life." "I hope so," Marcus replied. "Because someday he might be faced with his own choice about whether to help someone in trouble. If my story helps him choose courage, then everything we went through will have been worth it." As they drove home through the streets of their small city, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The scared single father who had struggled to braid his daughter's hair and burned too many dinners had somehow become a symbol of hope for people around the world. But more than that, he had raised a daughter who embodied every value he had tried to teach her. Emma was brave, compassionate, dedicated to service, and unshakably committed to protecting others. She was living proof that even in the darkest moments, love and courage could triumph. The bullets had found their mark that terrible day, but they could not touch the most important thing of all, the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter, the legacy of love that would outlast them both, and the ripple effects of one moment of perfect courage that would continue spreading goodness throughout the world for generations to come. In the end, Marcus Thompson had not just saved 8 children from a gunman. He had saved humanity's faith in itself, reminding the world that ordinary people were capable of extraordinary love, and that heroes walked among us every day, quietly choosing courage over comfort, service over safety, and love over fear. And in that small house on Maple Street, as Dr. Emma Thompson prepared for another day of saving young lives in the operating room, the greatest heroic legacy of all continued: the daily choice to carry forward the values of sacrifice, service, and unconditional love that would heal the world one person, one family, one moment of courage at a time.